This battle would forever change the course of English history and shape the future of Europe. Today, we're diving into the events of Stamford Bridge. 958 years ago, a couple days ago, in 1066, it was the end of the Viking Age. The Battle of Stamford Bridge, September 25th, 1066. Harald Hardrada was defeated and killed by Harald Godwinson at the battlefield at Stamford Bridge, a small village near York in the north of England. This Anglo-Saxon victory, overshadowed by the most famous battle at Hastings 3 weeks later, is nonetheless significant, as it was the last serious attempt by Vikings to conquer England. Hello and welcome back. I am Jarlbear for the History Armada, and today we are going to be talking about the Battle of Stamford Bridge as part of a new mini-series I am doing, a 3-part mini-series, maybe 4-part if we're lucky, about the conquering of England in 1066. So today we will be starting with the Battle of Stamford Bridge, which happened just about a week ago, and then next week, if you join me, we will be diving into a deep dive about William the Conqueror of Normandy. But first, we must talk about one of my favorite figures of history, Harald Hardrada. Born in 1015 in Norway, Harald was exiled in 1030 and spent a dozen years as a mercenary commander fighting for the Kievan Rus and the Byzantines in places as distant from Norway as modern-day Russia, Iraq, and Sicily. Harald returned to Norway in 1046, finding Canute's old empire collapsed. On the right of your screen, you can see a map of the North Sea Empire, which had been created by Canute the Great. Canute the Great had held roughly England, Norway, Denmark, and parts of Sweden under his loose rule until his death. Canute's old empire had collapsed with both sons dead and a Saxon permanently ruling England for the first time in 30 years. Magnus the Great, King of Norway and Denmark, died childless in 1047, leaving Harald with only Norway, not Denmark. Harald failed in his attempts to conquer Denmark, but when Edward the Confessor died in England in 1066, Harald laid claim to the throne of England, seeing it as property of the throne of Denmark, which was de jure his, if not de facto his. So on the left you can see an artist rendition of Harald Hardrada, quite a popular figure in history, and on the right, like I said, is a map of the North Sea Empire. So Harald Hardrada did a lot of very interesting things in his life. We might have to do a deep dive into Harald Hardrada's life at some point, because he was quite an interesting man. Exiled, like I said, in 1030, he went and was part of the Varangian Guard for the Byzantine Empire. Not only was he part of the Varangian Guard, but he later became leader of this guard, and he did a lot of exploratory fights for the empire, like I said, all the way from the Kievan Rus in modern-day Russia, down to Iraq and Sicily, all the way over to the Byzantine-held lands. He did much travel, and he learned a lot as a mercenary. When it came to being a ruler, he wasn't exactly the greatest, but when it came to being a warrior and a commander, that is where he excelled. On the 18th of September 1066, Harald landed at the head of a force of roughly 10,000 to 15,000 strong. Harald was allied with Harald Godwinson's estranged brother, Tostig, who had been deposed from his earldom in 1065 and was looking to regain it under Viking supervision. Harald, with an O, Godwinson, who likely had no idea that Harald, with an A, even desired the English throne, had been camped on the south coast all summer, and only returned to London early in September of 1066, so he was quite caught unawares as this Viking force came on the other side of his kingdom. However, upon learning of the defeat at Fulford Gate, which you can see on your map, just south of York in the north of England, Harald then managed to march 180 miles in just 4 days, raising men from local shires as he marched north, which is quite a feat in itself, getting men to join you back then, let alone march 180 miles on foot laden with arms and armor to get to the north of your kingdom. That march and the acquiring of men and arms is quite the feat, and I have to say, it is quite breathtaking the distance that he covered in such a short time. Harald Godwinson is thought to have only had an army of roughly 12,000 strong by the time he arrived at Stamford Bridge, though estimates do vary significantly higher and lower, as often do with historical records. but the most common ballpark is roughly 12,000 strong. Harald, again with an A, with only small northern lords opposing him, nonetheless developed a reputation for brutality, which caused many towns to capitulate without a fight, one exception being Scarborough. On the 24th of September, the Vikings captured York, as shown at the north of your map, with the 25th having been when they then met at Stamford Bridge, but York fell on the 24th. On the 24th of September, with the Vikings having captured York, the northern capital of England, Harald, with an A, and Tostig had no idea that Harald, with an O, and his army was camped only 7 miles west of their newly conquered city. So here we have Stamford Bridge in the north, where they will meet on September 25th. We have York, where they captured it on the 24th, or just the day before, and the gate Fulford, where they met September 20th. So at York, Harald Hardrada is sitting there comfortable with his newly acquired city, not realizing that Harald Godwinson was only 7 miles away. Now here comes one of the great criticisms of Harald Hardrada. Harald Hardrada meaning hard ruler, did have quite the reputation for brutality and for his iron-handed rule. But if he had been more aware of his surroundings and utilized those northern lords under his command to do more scouting, he most probably would have discovered and been aware of Harald Godwinson's force just 7 miles away. 7 miles is such a small distance, especially when considering how far Harald Godwinson marched in 4 days. If he had done that scouting that was necessary, he probably would have been alerted to this advance and not had what happened happen. Harald's quick march to Stamford Bridge is likely what won him the eventual battle, and the lack of scouting on Harald Hardrada's part. The Vikings were visibly not prepared for the battle so soon, some leaving their armor on board ships on the nearby river. A lot of them were caught without their weapons and without their armor. Additionally, their armor was scattered and their army was scattered across the region, some guarding the Viking fleet, with the result that roughly a third of Harald's forces showed up late to the battle. However, the valor of Viking troops was admirable. A small party of men keeping watch on the west bank of the river Durent fought to the death to delay Saxon advance so that the troops on the east bank would have time to form up. It is rumored that the Saxons were further delayed by a lone Viking axeman posted on the bridge who took down nearly 40 Saxon warriors before being stabbed by a pikeman in the groin beneath the bridge. You can see it here. What would eventually be the Battle of Stamford Bridge. On the battle flat, which was a circular-looking hill, King Harald Hardrada of Norway held that flat on the one side of Stamford Bridge, with King Harald Godwinson of England approaching from the other side of that said bridge. So, that's where it came down to that small band of Vikings holding off the Saxons, where they fought to the death to buy as much time for King Harald Hardrada as they could. It's also where that legend of the lone axeman comes from, as he held that bridge with his great Dane axe, not taking one step backwards and slaying many Saxons as he fought. Eventually, however, the Saxons were able to cross the bridge and forming battle lines on the east side of the river. Despite superior numbers and armor, the Saxons still struggled to break the Viking lines, until Harald Hardrada took an arrow to the throat, at which point the Vikings began to break. By the time the Vikings guarding the fleet showed up to the battle, it was too late to save the Viking cause. The Viking armor was almost entirely eliminated. As you can see here, the lone Viking axeman wielding his Dane axe, slaying Saxons by the dozen until he was eventually slain. King Harald, like I said, was pierced by an arrow to the throat, not having the armor he typically would, having been caught unaware and off guard by Harald Godwinson's advance. After the battle, Harald Godwinson gave mercy to Harald's son Olaf, now King of Norway, if he swore never to invade England again, which he did. While there would be Viking attacks in the future, the defeat at Stamford Bridge is nonetheless acknowledged by many historians as the end of the Viking era in English history, as they would never again pose a serious threat to the holder of the English throne. However, Harald Godwinson would not live long to celebrate his historic accomplishment, as we would talk about further into this miniseries, as just 3 days later, William of Normandy landed in Pevensey, Sussex. So, that brings us to the end of Stamford Bridge. It's believed that the Vikings probably could have won the battle if they had only had more time and had their armor. Again, that's where that scouting comes into play. I believe that if Harald Hardrada had sent out the Northern Lords to scout as he needed, they would have been able to prepare and not had to hold off to the death on the hold of the bridge. So, in the description of the video, you will find some references for you, some online links, as well as a book reference about the invasion of England and the battles of 1066. I highly recommend you check them out. I hope you learned a little bit about Harald Hardrada today and the Battle of Stamford Bridge, and I hope you are excited for the other two parts of this mini-series about the invasion of England and its conquering in 1066. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything at all, leave that in the comments section down below for me. I'll get back to you because I do read all of your comments and I really enjoy engaging with you guys. As always, I am Jarlbear, and I will see you in the next part of our mini-series about 1066. Until then, thank you so much for watching.